Building on top of Wagner and Schopenhauer is Friedrich Nietzsche, okay, who's considered one of the greatest German philosophers of all time. Okay, and he makes certain corrections to the philosophy of Schopenhauer and the music of Wagner. All right. Here are the three major differences between Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. You can see that Schopenhauer, he's a pessimistic Plato, okay, whereas Nietzsche is an optimistic Aristotle. So Nietzsche's main complaint is this. Okay, Schopenhauer's conception is the source of everything is desire. And from desire will manifest itself in physical bodies in order to obtain what it wants, okay? And that's true. That makes sense. And then Schopenhauer's solution is, then we must deny this desire, okay? We must negate this desire, and then we will bring peace to the world. So for Nietzsche, this is confusing because, wait a minute here. The desire, the will, manifests itself in physical bodies. Why would it do that? What's the logic of that? Okay? And Schopenhauer would say, well, because God is evil, because God wants us to suffer. And then Nietzsche is like, okay, first of all, if God is evil, what's the point of resisting him? Right? If it brings us enjoyment to seek desire, then what's wrong with it? Is it possible that God is good and that God lets desire manifest itself in us in order for us to pursue our desire? Okay? So this is one of the major differences. For Schopenhauer, we are just biological beings that have a will to life. We want to procreate. But for Nietzsche, it's the will to power. Okay, this is a very really famous phrase from Nietzsche. The will to power, the will to expand ourselves. Okay, the will to achieve our fullest desires. Okay, not just to procreate, but to impose our will on reality itself. That's the true purpose of life. That's why God created us, to become gods ourselves. Because otherwise, this makes no sense. How do we go from desire to bodies? It only makes sense if the bodies can amplify our desire and help us achieve our desire. Okay? The will to power. This is a really important concept. Schopenhauer believes that multiplicity is conflict. The fact that this will manifest itself in our bodies can only lead to conflict because we're all fighting for scarce resources. For example, the ability to procreate. Okay? But for Nietzsche, multiplicity is creativity. It's because there's conflict that you have action, and action leads to innovation. And innovation by itself is progress. Okay? And so, for Schopenhauer, the ideal person, the Superman, is the compassionate monk. The person who feels sympathy for the world, and as such, engages in a process of self-denial, self-negation. He refuses to procreate, he refuses to struggle, he refuses to eat. Okay? The monk. But for Nietzsche, the ideal is the Übermensch, the Übermensch. The Übermensch is hard to translate. We usually translate it as Superman, but you can also translate it as Overman. Okay? The person above humanity, the person above history. So the ideal, the paragon, the example that Nietzsche uses is Napoleon, right? Who's Napoleon? Napoleon is an individual who can step outside of history to control history, to manipulate history. That's what the Übermensch is. Okay? We ourselves are always controlled by social forces, right? We don't want to piss off our classmates. We want to please our teachers and our parents. So therefore, we are slaves to public opinion. But Nietzsche says, to be an Übermensch, you have to ignore public opinion. You have to ignore community consensus and just focus on what is right to you. To look deep into yourself and figure out what is right for you and only you. Okay, that's the Übermensch. And for him, the ideal example, of course, is Napoleon. Okay? And why is this important? Because these ideas, in the context of Weimar Republic, will lead to the rise of the Nazis and Hitler. Okay? Because Hitler is promising himself to be the next Napoleon. Right? That's Hitler's promise to the German people. I will be your Napoleon. I will unite you. And I will lead you to victory against all our enemies. Right? Okay. Does that make sense, guys? Are you guys following this? All right. So let's look at a couple of passages from Nietzsche, okay? Nietzsche is a very brilliant philosopher, so he's very complicated, he's very complex, and he can at times be very contradictory, okay? All right, so let's read a passage from the Genealogy of Morals, which is his most famous book. We can no longer conceal from ourselves precisely what this will, under the direction of the aesthetic ideal, expresses, which is hatred of anything human, animal, or material, abhorrence of the senses of reason itself, fear of happiness and beauty, the desire to escape from all illusion, change, growth, death, wishing even from desire itself. All this means, let us have the courage to confront it, a wish for oblivion, an aversion to life, a reputation of everything vital to existence, but it is and remains a will. And to say at the end that which I said at the beginning, men will desire oblivion rather than not desire at all. We are desire, okay? It's really a question of how we manifest our desire. In today's society, in the Christian, Buddhist worldview, it's important to negate our desire. But when we negate our desire, we negate what our desire could lead us to, which is truth and beauty, and creativity and progress and innovation. Okay? And when we negate ourselves, we're not returning back to unity. We are only embracing oblivion. Okay? That's a problem with Christianity. It's turning us into slaves. That's a problem with modernity. That's a problem with society. We are all being forced to become slaves. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, let's go on. To call the taming of an animal improving it sounds to ears almost like a joke. He who knows what goes on in menageries doubts very much whether an animal is improved in such places. It is certainly weakened, it is made less dangerous, and by means of the depressing influence of fear, pain, wounds, and hunger, it is converted into a sick animal, and the same holds good of the tame man whom the priest has improved. Okay, this is a great metaphor. How can we understand the impact of society on people? Well, society is a zoo, okay? We're all cage animals. If you think about it, okay, what is school then? School is a zoo, okay? Before, you were allowed to run around and explore the world and learn things for yourself, right? And as such, you mastered the world around you. You could hunt, you could farm, you could kill people, you could build alliances, you could write plays. But in school, what do we ask you to do? We ask you to come to school, we ask you to come to class on time, take notes, take tests, and then we give you a piece of paper, right? We turn you into cage animals. So you lose the capacity to think for yourself, right? That's what school is. So there's nothing wrong with what Nietzsche is saying, okay? This is a brilliant metaphor to capture the essence of modernity, okay? Society, education, it's all meant to degrade your capacity to think for yourself in order to make you more obedient to power, okay? All right, so if you take Schopenhauer, Wagner, and Nietzsche together and you combine them, what you get is a rejection of Christianity and a return to paganism, okay? So let's look at the differences. In the Christian worldview, there is a God. If there's a God, there is a framework of good and evil. So you must do good and you must avoid evil, okay? But in the pagan worldview, there is no God. There's many gods, but the gods themselves have no power over fate. And as a result, it is up to you to define good and evil. It's up to you to act and to find meaning in the world. Okay? So going back to school, the metaphor, right? Today we have grades, and therefore you're focused on getting grades. But if we had no grades, we have no teachers, then you have to go learn for yourself. You would have to go figure out your own education. What's amazing about this idea is you would want to, because Nietzsche says we are first and foremost desire. We desire to grow. So if we left you alone and said no grades, no school, no tests, it does not mean that you will stop learning. It just means that you will learn what you want to learn. Okay? All right, second difference. Christianity demands faith, obedience to God. Paganism demands action. Okay? You seek meaning for yourself through action. The last difference is Christianity focuses on individual free will. Okay? Which just means you are free to obey the powerful. But in the pagan mindset, it's about unity of will. Okay? If we want to act, we can only do so by working together. All right? We will find a leader to lead us, but the leader only represents the unity of will. Okay? Does that make sense? So during the Weimar Republic, with the rise of Nazism, you now have a rejection of Christianity and a return to paganism as a solution to the national humiliation of Germany. All right? And this is what leads to the rise of Adolf Hitler. Okay? This man is Paul von Hindenburg, the same man who ordered the surrender of Germany. In 1933, he is president of Germany, the leader, and he appoints Adolf Hitler, the chancellor of Germany. Okay? The question then is, why would he do that? Right? Yeah, I mean, like, why would the head of the army, the head of the nation, make Adolf Hitler chancellor? And the reason is this. Adolf Hitler was a German spy. He was a He was a spy for the German army. Okay? This is really important. Let me explain this. This is from Wikipedia, guys, okay? So I'm not making this up. It says very clearly, as an intelligence agent of the army, Hitler's job was to influence other soldiers and to infiltrate the German Workers' Party, okay? The Nazi Party, the National Socialists. Okay, so why is this happening? So remember, the German army surrendered because they were afraid of revolution back at home. Who was leading the revolution? The extreme left and extreme right. Okay? What's the difference between extreme left and extreme right? Both are populists. They all believe in workers' rights. The left believe in international solidarity. Okay? Specifically with Russia, the Soviet Union, and other workers in the world. The right are nationalists. They believe in German unity. Okay? So the army is like, okay, right now the most powerful group in Germany are the socialists. Right? The left. We need to support the right. So Hitler goes into the Nazi Party, the German Workers' Party, and he helps to finance it, okay? Hitler is giving money to these guys. And because he's such a charismatic speaker, he eventually becomes their leader. But at this point in history, okay, this is really important, this is a really small group of people. They're extreme, they're violent, but they are a minority. The majority are the socialists, okay? This is something that you're not taught in school, but this is very important to remember. It is the army that finances the building of the Nazi Party in order to dampen the influence of the socialists. Okay, because remember, the army now is still dedicated to avenging the national humiliation of World War I. Okay? All right. So this is Carroll Quigley, and he wrote a long book called Tragedy and Hope. Okay? And he explains Carroll Quigley, he is a professor. He was a professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He was Bill Clinton's teacher. Okay? He was Bill Clinton's teacher, and he's a widely respected scholar. And in his book, he explains how Hitler was able to rise and take over the leadership of Germany. He explains at this point in history that Germany is threatened by two opposing forces. The first force, of course, is communism. Right? The Soviet Union. That's a huge menace to Germany. But another menace that's even more menacing is capitalism. Okay? Because at this point in history, what's happening is the international capitalists are trying to create a central banking system in order to control the entire global economy. Okay? And he writes about this. This is 1920s. The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim. Nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Okay? This is really important to understand. 1920s, all these bankers in the world, America, Britain, France, Germany, they're getting together and they're conspiring on how to create a global financial system that can control the world and create a feudal system. Right? And guess what, guys? You don't know this, but they succeeded. The system we have today is the one they created. Okay? But I will explain this later on in the course. Okay? But this is something that the Germans